Today we are presenting Digital Transformation Readiness, Assessing Manufacturing Maturity for Your Path to Success. We are here with John Cowden, Senior Director of Strategic Engagements at Arbella. So without further ado, let's get started. John, you have the floor.
Thank you, everyone. I know that taking time out of your day is obviously vital, and I want to make sure that within this next hour that we spend a good amount of time, hopefully adding value to your food for thought and giving you some insights to things that you can take into consideration as we move forward. So with that, I'll just proceed through the presentation just to give you an idea of what we're talking about today. I'll do a quick introduction. Transformation. We'll talk about transformation because there's kind of a catchword in our industry, and it's quite abused. And we'll talk about that and what the definitions of maybe transformation are. We'll talk about learning models, the research of knowledge that's out there. There's a huge body of knowledge out there that we can really partake of to make our industries better. And then we'll talk about maturity models, kind of the characteristics behind a maturity model. We'll talk about some of the things you need to take into consideration as you build one. And then I'll even show you a quick example of something that we've done that we've seen some major success in on really measuring the maturity itself. So with that, we'll push forward. This is me. For those that are interested, you're welcome to, at any time, contact me later on with questions around this topic or other topics that you might find important. But I am a strategic director here at Arbella and enjoy really the realm of manufacturing itself. So please reach out to me with any questions later on. Just real quick before I get into this, just about Arbella. If you're not familiar with Arbella, we are one of the inner circle Microsoft partners, really the top 2% in the world when it comes to Microsoft partnerships. We really focus our energies on the Microsoft stack, D365, CRM, all these different elements of Microsoft we're really hands-on involved in. Our company is a bit over 250 employees at the time. We cross many languages, many cultures, we're across many countries, but we really focus our energy on the industries that you see here, really around health, manufacturing, distribution, some other offshoot industries that we deal with, and really connected field services. So we have our hands in a lot of different areas, and it's important for us to really make sure that we help those out there that are listening to this webinar, as well as others that are interested in developing skills, knowledge, so on and so forth in these industries. That's what we feel that our strengths are. And then again, the Microsoft stack. There's a lot of elements to that Microsoft stack, and we're heavily involved in it. And we look forward to working with those that are already working with us, continue that working relationship. We look forward to working with those that maybe haven't yet tested Arbella. We're here for you. So enough about Arbella. Let's get into some of the topics that I find really important here for today's webinar. I'd like to start off with learning models. And really, I think this slide, it says a lot to me, and I find it heavily interesting. And the reason is one of the things I like to say to people when I go into new industries and I look at their manufacturing facilities or the distribution facilities and see what they have going on. Everyone has built up a level of immunity, and that's what I like to call it, immunity to issues, immunity to workarounds. Sometimes we're so involved in our own industry, as we mature in that industry, we stop seeing some of the smaller pain point issues that we've dealt with in the past, or we learn to work around, and we almost become immune. And it's like this picture here, when you have people with blindfolds on, and you ask them, tell us what it is that's in front of you, or in one case, there's an individual on top. Tell us what this feels like. And people stop seeing the overall picture, and they start imagining what it is that they're dealing with. In some cases, that might be hope. I like to say that because a lot of people have somewhat given up hope in their own industry because they've dealt with the issues for so long, and there doesn't seem to be an apparent way around it. That's one thing that disappears, immunity to other things. But this to me is important because we'll talk a lot about this on how to see the forest through the trees and not just to focus on the tree itself. With that, I wanted to get into transformation. This term to me has really become quite a catchphrase. Over, I would say, the last 10 years, people use this quite extensively in their presentations. They use it when they talk about their industry. They use it when they talk about innovation. It's everywhere. But what does it really mean? You know, I found a good body of research around transformation, the term transformation, and how it's interpreted. And there's really three key elements that come out of this. The first one is operational. This one is probably the most commonly used one in the manufacturing and distribution area. When they talk about operational and they talk about transformation, they want to build products quicker, faster, more efficient, higher quality. You know, they want to satisfy the customer demand to, you know, yesterday, because we all know that our customers want our products yesterday, even when we can't promise them until tomorrow or the next day, if we're lucky, right? But this is one that's quite obviously, you know, focused on in our industry. The other one that comes out, and we just don't want to make assumptions around what people term transformation to be, is operational model transformation. And this one is I love using Netflix. This is a great one that I think Netflix really coined. Netflix shifted from sending DVDs through the mail to streaming video content. They then went a step further and says, look, why are we distributing other people's content when we can start creating our own? And they started investing heavily in their own content as well as distributing other content. And then they understood what the preference of the viewer was based upon the data that they were collecting. And then they started changing that even as well. So they went from really better, faster, quicker to let's change the model, let's set it off a little bit differently, let's see how this matures. You know, what's the 2.0 of what we're doing now? What's the 3.0 of what we're doing now, and how that matures down the path? And that's really kind of the operational model when it comes to transformation. And the last one is strategic. Now, I'm not saying that there are other levels and other definitions of this, but these are probably the three major definitions that come out of asking the question to executives of what transformation means to you. And strategic is one that's quite significant, one that we've all experienced, one that we see quite a bit. This is when you something transformative happens. So it's taking liquid from gas, lead to gold, Apple from computers to consumer gadgets, Google from advertising to, you know, driverless cars, Amazon from retail to cloud-based computing. They're really changing the definition of what they're doing and how they go about it. So when people start talking transformation, to understand what that term means to them is vital for the success of how you then take a model, how you understand a learning process to be, and how to evolve that in a way that gets the right results. With that, anytime you have transformation models, it's very important to make sure that you have defining measurements around those. So it's important here, what does leadership mean when they drop the word transformation? And more importantly, how does this affect the way that we measure your performance? That to me is a key indicator of transformation. To say we're going to transform is one thing. To understand what that transformation is going to do and how we measure that is a completely different animal. And it's very important for us to make sure that as we're creating our overall understanding of how we want to mature within models, how we want to progress, that we understand what the defining measurements are going to be associated to that. So not simply just putting our objectives out there, but understanding how those objectives align to a measurement so that we can then understand where we are, see where we're going, see the resulting measurements and how they are affected based upon the models that we put in front of people. So this is key. So with the operational, pretty standard, you'll find in most manufacturing distribution factories, maybe a dashboard up on the wall somewhere, or something that your management is looking at, where they can see the day-to-day. What's my throughput right now? Where are my stoppages? Where are the things that are happening right now for me to be able to make quick decisions? The operational model is a little different. It requires a change in what's being measured, right? When we talk about, you know, Netflix, where they were measuring maybe the distribution lead time of their DVDs that they were sending out originally, that now goes away because they're online, they're streaming content. So changing the measurements of how we view our people that are joining our web engine and how they need to be measured now. they started looking at what people were looking at when it came to that. So they started measuring, okay, how do we put the right content in front of XYZ consumer that loves action movies versus dramas? So they started changing the way they did their metrics. And then strategic, right, is a completely holistic change where all of a sudden their competitive markets become different. So Google goes from advertising to driverless cars. So they went from competing against, marketing engines to now competing against GM. And understanding what their competitive edge is, how they're going to compete against GM, is a completely different evolution of metrics. The reason I bring this out is everything really resides around understanding how to measure something in the end. To say we're transforming is great. And, people love to hear that, but to show them how you're transforming is very important. And to have it quantitative rather than just qualitative holds a lot of weight in our industry. With that, I think there's just a natural, fluidity of talking about transformation, to talk about the 4 pillars of digital transformation. So as you get into the digital endeavor, which everybody has to now with COVID on us and how things are maturing in the industry and where things are going, a lot more technology is really being viewed, right? And when it comes to the pillars of digital transformation, you can see here the 4 key pillars are pretty simple, and I think most of the people on this call will recognize these, right? When it comes to empowering employees, engaging clients, optimizing operations, and transforming your products, this is very important, and it's key, because understanding the innovation that your employees can bring to your operations will then obviously optimize your operations. Understanding what the client really needs versus what you think they need will help you transform your products in a way that become products that are desired rather than products that are not needed. I'll give you a good example of this one. This one to me is very interesting. I worked with an industrial goods client at one time where they owned a lot of the market shares in their particular equipment that they were producing. But the key is they wanted to produce something bigger than anybody's ever seen before that pumps out more volume of product. When it came to product, come out foods, right? Procured foods. How to pump out more. So they decided that it was important for them to be able to build the biggest, baddest machine that existed out there. And they did. They made a work of art. And at the end of that work of art, they found out that not a single client wanted to buy this massive machine. And the reason of this is it was twofold. One was the facility that they needed to construct in order to house this machine had to be astronomical. The second one is they said, look, we would rather have 2 smaller machines, because if one goes down, we can still produce for our clients. Whereas if we rely solely on this mega massive machine and that goes down, we're done. That's the difference between us surviving and us dying. So it's very interesting that we really endeavor to understand how the 4 key pillars come together. And I think a great representation is this, right? As you engage your customers, you understand what it is they want. That allows you to transform product. I have operations going on. I have innovative people on my floor that are working on this product day in and day out. They looking at the process of this product. They then empower, you give them empowerment. They start saying, hey, look, we can get better, faster, quicker by doing X, Y, Z versus what we're doing now. That ultimately optimizes your operations. And all that comes into this data intelligence mechanism, understanding the data that's driving so that you understand how the results of what you've done have been achieved. You understand what now is being viewed, what's coming out of that data mechanism, allows you to make better decisions, allow you to become more proactive versus reactive. And obviously a lot of that's done by the surrounding systems that you put into play, right? Having D365 for your operations or your finance and operations is very important. Have a strong ERP system out there is very important. But as you mature that system and as you grow that system, you see abilities of optimization, right? Capabilities that we need to now bring into our overall product. Defining that platform allows you to make better decisions on how you bring that platform together. So really the data analytics, making sure that you have the right stuff coming in, really allows you to be able to dissect, or really, I guess, analyze what it is that you need to do. What's the next iteration of your evolution? That is digital transformation in a nutshell. And to me, I'm going to take a minute here, but to me, what's happening when you do this is you're starting to provide data. You're starting to see tangible, I guess, knowledge. Tangible knowledge is coming to your forefront. So now when you have this knowledge, you obviously get to make decisions on how you dissect that, how you mature that, where you go from here. It also helps you ask questions. Is anybody else experiencing what I'm experiencing? It allows you to reach out there now to say, these are the results I'm getting. Go to that infinite, all-knowing, all-wisdom internet and finding other people experiencing the same thing. It allows you to start massaging and understanding what it is you need to do. And a lot of that is portrayed in models such as this, the modularity, maturity matrix. I'm not necessarily going to spend time on the modularity maturity matrix, but I do want to say that depending on what you're doing, there's learning models everywhere for you to go out and partake of. So multiple learning models you'll see here. I'll show you a couple, and then I'll really focus in on one. But there's a lot of research out there, and it's important for us to go out there and really endeavor to pull out the information that I think is best for our companies, best for our organizations. Managers often don't appreciate how important manufacturing is to product development, to their customers, unless they go out there and see what the trends are happening, what learning is being done out there. So this being one, another one being like a firefighting. I pulled this up simply because everybody does a certain amount of firefighting, right? To full understanding. How do we go from a firefighter to operational, validating theories? How do we make sure that what we're doing is important, and where do we start, where do we go? So again, a lot of learning models out there. I think probably everyone on this call has done a certain amount of firefighting. I know that I've done that with clients. I've done that personally. I think even all of us that might have a home, right? There's a certain amount of things that you have to resolve in your own home that allow you on a daily basis to be a decision maker, to be a mental giant per se when it comes to certain things like this. But really where I want to focus my attention today on a learning model is information that we surfaced from MIT. And I think this one is very interesting because this one specifically is really geared towards digital intensity in your workplace and functional intensity. So digital intensity really being around, our technology that we have in place for us to be able to be successful. Functional intensity being around our processes. What processes do we have in place for us to be successful, right? Whereas the digital intensity might highlight something. What am I doing now to resolve this issue from a functional standpoint? If I have, a constrained machine, for example, in my factory, and I've got the digital information that tells me that everything kind of resides around this bottleneck, what am I now doing to resolve that bottleneck? Is there something I can do different in my manufacturing processes? Can I alleviate that somehow, put some of that stress on another machine that is not being utilized as much? But they've come to find out that those industries that fall in this bottom sector where they kind of have a low digital intensity and they have a low functional intensity, obviously the results of that is revenue is a negative, profitability is a negative, market value is a negative. For those that really start focusing more over into the functional element, they start seeing some results, right? And again, this is out of MIT, but the results are, profitability starts going up, market value starts going up, but they're still seeing a negative in revenue. So now we start looking at more of the left side here, the digital intensity. They saw that with their research they've done is those that focus strictly really on that upper left-hand corner are starting to see revenue gains, but they're still struggling with the profitability. They're still struggling with market value. And as everybody on this call would imagine, where does that resolve, right? Over in that upper right-hand column is really where the industry needs to push itself to get to. A lot of times they don't know how to do that. Well, with maturity models, we'll talk about maturity models here in a minute. Some of those things will start gaining traction both to the right hand and to the upper left hand, which ultimately will reside and bring you into this upper right hand quadrant. Now, the question that I pose to everybody on this call, where do you think, based upon this research, if you haven't seen this before, where do you think distribution and manufacturing fall? You think it's upper right-hand corner, upper left-hand corner, maybe down in bottom right-hand corner, or how about really in the left-hand corner? Anybody have a drum roll? I like to bring this up because you'll see a bunch of different industries and where they reside. And unfortunately, manufacturing and distribution, with all the research that MIT has done, really lacks in a high level of both functional maturity as well as digital maturity. And a lot of this has to do with age of the industry. If you look at high tech, obviously high tech is up in the upper right-hand corner for good reason. You know, technology evolves every day. And if I'm not evolving with it 3 months from now and my whole company's on high tech, I might kill my company. It's such a fast-paced industry that it has to be focused and it has to be cutting edge up in the upper right-hand quadrant when it comes to how they do work as well as the technology they use. Manufacturing is quite an old industry. And I think for those on the call, some might be in a very old industry. If you're in mining or oil and gas, very old industries, right? And a lot of times, the maturity and the evolution and the speed on how they evolve is slow, and partly because of the organizational creep of we've been there, we've done it, we've survived the test of time, we've survived the weather of time. And so the evolution is really small because there's the threat of the industry itself from disappearing really is not in the forefront of their forte. So this is where it revolves. Let's talk about an industry that we all know just because it's interesting, right? We all appreciate money or respect money to a certain extent. We're all working, we're taking time out of our schedules to understand our industry better, to make money, right? To take care of our families, take care of our friends, take care of ourselves. And the industry, the banking industry, we all know that around 2008 really had a tremendous crash. Prior to that, if you recall, I know I recall because I'm old enough and you probably can see that in the camera with my age, that if I wanted to take money out or I wanted to deposit money, everything was very manual. I went to the bank quite a bit throughout the week to do certain transactions. After the crash and where they focused a lot of their technology and how they wanted to advance after coming out of this, knowing what they had to do, they focused a lot on technology rather than just the function of going into a place. They've elevated their whole standpoint and they come out of that dip faster than what was projected. Now with that, now when I look back at how I do my banking, I can't remember the last time I went into a bank or made a deposit, at a physical bank or pulled money out of a physical teller. I do everything online now. Everything's done. I take a snapshot of a check that might be sent to me. Everything's direct deposited. Everything's done. Automatic payments. It's all evolved so much now that I'm much more of a banking advocate than I was in the past. This is where we need to try to drive our industry when it comes to manufacturing. So the overall, and I think it's probably important to note, that digital transformation takes those stages. And for us to get up there, require those 4 pillars. For us to optimize our operations, for us to empower our employees, engage our customers, and transform our product. Our people, our clients will buy what they need, not what we think they need. Now, obviously, there may be a new niche and we have to be innovative, so don't get me wrong on that. We need to be innovative. We want to still drive that, but we need to get the voice of the customer in our ears so that our innovation is running in a direction that we believe that we'll get the best value, the best return from. And that, I think, really leads me up to, I think the other thing I would say about learning before I go is you're not alone. Myself as a consultant, I've had a lot of opportunity to be in a lot of different factories, meet a lot of different operations, meet a lot of interesting individuals. And one of the things I often hear is, oh, you haven't met a company like us, or oh, we're gonna make you dizzy on the problems that we face, right? Or our secret sauce is so secret, it makes us so unique. Our whole operation is something you've never seen before. You know, I'm not here to deflate those opinions, but I will say when it comes to manufacturing at a very high level, it's buy, build, and ship. And I know that's very simplified in its process, but it's very interesting when you start showing what's best in practices, what's best in class. People start seeing that maybe they're not as different as they would expect. They're not as unique. So take the opportunity to go out there and partake of people that understand learning models, partake of the resources that are out there, because you'll start seeing that you're not alone. But I love this statement here. It can be kind of confusing, but to me, this embodies what everybody doesn't know. But the key here is we don't know what we don't know. We can't act on what we don't know. We won't know until you search. And here's the key, searching. You won't search what you don't question, key number 2, and you won't question what you don't measure, key number 3. If we live our lives in the what I call the immune response, we become quite immune to our operations, and we allow ourselves to reside in that status quo, we won't question, we won't change, we won't be able to evolve our industry, to mature our industry. We all know the definition of insanity, right? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. The way that we start providing different results is making sure that we're questioning and we're putting measurements behind it, so then we can start analyzing and attacking and seeing how we can mature through that. Let's talk about maturity models real quick now. You know, why maturity models? Organizations want to improve their processes, practices, procedures. I see this on a day-to-day basis with the clients I'm working, to know where they stand in their industry, right? Where is our competitive edge? Ultimately, I think all of this goes back to that competitive edge. How am I going to compete in my industry? How am I going to make sure that I'm consuming market shares? I'm getting the revenue. How do I do this? What is it that I have to analyze in my own industry in order to make sure that we're better, faster, quicker, or we evolve like a Netflix, or we change our direction altogether like a Google? Well, maturity itself is the measurement of positive progression from an initial baseline. We need to know where we are right now so that we can make the incremental progression, the incremental changes, the improvements we need, both from a technical standpoint as well as a functional standpoint, for us to be able to mature our industry and really increase our positioning in our competitive industry, right? So maturity is that positive progress. And then understanding capability, because this is where some people fall short when it starts on maturity models. They say, hey, look, we're a brand new company. I want to be a $10 billion company 6 months from now, right? Where we made $30,000 in revenue. Now, I'm giving you an extreme here. But you also have to understand that within maturity, you have to understand your capability, the capability of that organization. Make sure that, okay, if I'm setting a goal that's an aggressive goal, I need to understand that I've got the resources and the capability to at least make myself positioned in such a way that I can achieve that goal to an extent. So it's key that you understand that organizational capabilities are also important. By taking an organization that moves through a maturity model, you achieve higher levels of reward, positive outcomes, like predictability. I can see what's happening in my industry now, predictability processes, understanding controls, true alignment to my overall objectives. That's the key. There's a background on maturity models. I suggest that if this is something that interests you, take some time out to understand maturity models. I don't want to spend too much time on this for the sake of time, because look, they exist out there. There's a number that you can go out there and grab on manufacturing. The important fact is, according to maturity systems, right, around organizational, technology, biology, whatever it might be, the key is to increase their capabilities over time regarding achievements in some desirable future state. That's what we need to achieve, right? Maturity can be captured quantitatively and qualitatively in a discrete and continuous manner. That is key. Understanding that there is a background. It really started, a lot of the U.S. government really emphasized a lot of this in the Department of Defense over the course of multiple engagements, multiple wars. They started realizing for us to be ahead of everybody else, there are certain things we need to do. There's a background around it, but it really came down to corporate governance, IT and strategic alignment, service-oriented architectures, and really performance management. So spend some time recognizing what those are. It helps you really gain I think, appreciation of how it's matured over time. To me, this one here, I think, is really where we want to engage in the conversation, because the characteristics around a maturity model help us start to digest what it is that we need to do. Where are we right now? What are some of the things that we need to take in consideration as we build our own maturity models? And what are the levels of that maturity model? As you can see here, level 1 being the initial level, this is really a total lack of awareness, a lack of reliable data for decision making, variability within the manufacturing process. A lot of that resides down in that lower level. What to do in a level like this? Well, there's things you can do. Identifying the business drivers, get commitment and resources, understanding the business process and expectations. Those are some of the key standpoints that you start saying, okay, if I'm here, what are the things I need to start doing to mature myself? That level 2, understanding, this one here is still a lack of business sponsorship and leadership, limited employee empowerment. Mainly managers and executives are really kind of the empowered ones around this. Data inconsistencies, there is some data, but there's some data inconsistencies. Well, what can I do if I'm in a level like this? Well, get buy-in from executive sponsors on improvement initiatives. Define metrics to analyze specific departmental and functional performances. Identify and outline business processes. Make cases for BI consistency centers. Understand what it is you need to do. So you go from no support to minor support, understanding how to get there, and then you get to that middle ground, the repeatability, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. But funding from the business units on project by project basis, specific set of users, is realizing value. Successful focus on specific business needs starts to highlight, well, what can we do, to help mature ourselves in this one? Well, you can increase cross-functional training, scope across multiple, departments, find proper investment and commitment for data analytics, work through business processes, identifying areas of improvement, driving improvement towards those performance measurements like we talked about earlier, and expand the user base. So you go from really nothing to now where we're getting repeatability. We have people investing in us. Things are starting to mature in a way that we can see consistencies. It may not be complete consistency. It may not be a total alignment across your organization, but there's things happening there. On that 4th level, this one's interesting. Now we're establishing a balanced portfolio of standards. Business objectives drive BI and performance management systems. Deploy enterprise process flows with supporting data and dashboards. Very, very important there. Very key. Governance policies, defining and enforcing. Understanding that once here's the great thing about process improvement. I might make a process improvement today, but if I don't do anything to reinforce that, like everything else in life, it breaks down. It's one of the laws of thermodynamics. Science tells it breaks down. So we need to reinforce it. We need to make sure that there's protocols behind it to support it, to emphasize it, to strengthen it, so it can endure the test of time. What do you do in the process here? Well, we look for extended business applications to suppliers, customers, business partners. We determine how to use BI to support evolving business objectives and strategies. And then really the ultimate level that we're all focused on when it comes to a maturity model characteristics is that 5th and final level, right? And that's creating stability through data, through business processes, through standards, through, complete business process improvement initiative programs, through, learning programs for your people, training programs. Everybody feels the full support of the organization. The organization's behind the people, behind the process, behind the protocols to make sure that you are competitively over everybody else. You have the advantages, both in the market, both in the revenue. You know, those things are very important. But information, and I would say this, more importantly, from the optimization, unified company culture comes into play to clarify and understandable goals. So you actually have goals that everybody understands. Everybody's departmental goals are aligned to those overall strategic objectives. Everything flows through this nice engine, right? And more importantly, and I don't know how many people are on this call, but information is trusted across the company. Man, that's a mouthful sometimes in industry. Information is trusted. Single source of truth is trusted. Data is accurate and clean. That is an amazing thing. And you can see that, look, to bridge the gaps between these things, you know, there are elements. So from, you know, level 1 to level 2, you got to create a level of understanding so that people understand what it is that they should be looking at. From level 2 to level 3, start building that foundation, that structure that we talked about. From level 3 to level 4, leverage the data and information. Start making informed insights. Start making informed decisions to evolve the organization, to evolve the department, to evolve the, you know, it could go down to, you know, the doc. It could be a part of a departmental, you know, flow. It could be the department itself. It can be the supporting departments around it. You know, how do me as HR support X, Y, Z, right? Leveraging data is important. And then aligning with strategic objectives. This is so important that you have these keys. Now, I was asked by someone that, John, you know, our organization is not mature. We don't know what we don't know, like we said, but maybe it's time for us to question. And if I'm afraid if I question with my organization, our group is going to say, well, I want to go from level 1 to level 5. And that doesn't seem right. I would say this, that for those that, no matter what their organizations, no matter what they tell their organization, and the organization's focused on hitting this without maybe having the level of understanding of going through this, is that if you go to this level 5, if anything, align yourself, understand what those strategic objectives are. By grabbing those strategic objectives and working backwards, your pace to mature from level 1 to level 5 is much quicker than if you start from the ground up and try to, I'm going to take this endeavor on, and hopefully I can convince the next guy who's above me to take this endeavor on, and hopefully I can convince that guy after that. By going to the top and aligning yourself, the speed and pace in which you can mature is much quicker. So I'll share this real quick. This is a quick excerpt of one of the many things that we measure. When Arbella goes into an organization and we do what we call a manufacturing maturity assessment, there's multiple levels to that. And I'll show you some core to that in a minute. But one of them was, this one here is around workforce and workforce awareness and how much the workforce participates. You know, and I often will go into an organization, talk to the people and find out where they think they score on this. Right? Are they at, you know, are they at a level 4 where they're really strategic thinking and they're getting to that point where they're almost pervasive to get to that really high level 5? Are they an ad hoc organization where they're simply just fighting fires? Nobody seems to be talking to each other, you know, and whatever the pain of the game today is, you know, hopefully my name's not associated to it, so I'm not the one that gets beat up, right? But we have these maturity assessments where we look at this in specific areas. I think this one here is training, right? And you can see here on number 1, the workforce is unaware of core company, you know, let's see, unaware of the company's core beliefs and values. The workforce is somewhat aware of the core beliefs, but department is misaligned, right? The workforce is aware of departmental focus, but unaware of company focus. So it kind of goes through this thing to see where you're at. So you start from this initial to this optimize. So taking these characteristics of this model, I highly suggest that you go out there, do your research, work with people like us, and we can talk about where the elements of measurements really can be defined and where the most value will come out of your organization. And then to circle back, like we said earlier with learning models, it's very important that you have measurements that are associated to what you're trying to achieve. So if my objectives are to, get better throughput or increase my throughput by 50% this year, I need to understand what's happening to my throughput, what are the measurements associated to that, and how to get not reports, but true indicators, key performance indicators out of my system so that I know where the real problems are so I can make true decisions, not simply just saying I'm highlighting a problem, but the actionable information associated to it. We won't question what we don't know, like that quote says. And again, measure what is measurable and make measurable what is not. Yeah, what a wise statement there. I think all of us understand that, hey, we may have a broken down system. Maybe we're not there yet, even on the BI. Maybe we're not there on the information. Well, that's part of the maturity that we have to evolve ourselves through. Steps to creating a maturity model, I think, are key, and I'm not going to belabor this too much because of the sake of time. But as mentioned, maturity models should be geared towards performance measurements. And what are the measurable components of a model? Well, understanding where you are in your org's current state, know the key capabilities of each component, and then build a measurement that allows you to measure performance. Those are the steps. So afterwards, as you're looking through this, and if you decide to walk this path of creating maturity models, here are some high-level steps I think that will help facilitate that for you. What are the elements of manufacturing excellence strategy? I think a lot of these will resonate with people on this call. Look, we want to be the best that we can be. And that comes understanding, customer value. What do the customers truly value? And have we geared ourselves into that value? Have we got rid of eliminated waste in our industry? Some of these you might even see that there's a lean text to some of this information here. But there is, let's focus on the value of our industry. Let's get rid of the non-value of our industry. And how do we do that? If we feel like we're a mature organization and we need to get to, we're at 3.0, we need to get to 4.0, how do we get to that next level of optimization? How do we engage the technology out there? How do we engage the maturity out there for us to do? See the flow of value creation, reducing lead times and surface problems, involving people to solve problems. I'm going to say that out of all these things, I would say waste and involving people by far, in my standpoint of all of the companies I've gone through, seem to be some of the most critical issues. You have such massive brain trusts in your organization, and not tapping into that potential, man, what a loss. What a loss, I think. And the other one is waste. We become so immune to our organizations, and the workarounds that we forget. And the only way, when I go into a new organization, I always say, look, I'm not here to tell you how to do your work better, because you know how to do your work better than I do. But I am here to say is if I was hired today, what issues do I need to know about that you've now become immune to? And it opens their eyes. Man, I didn't think about this. I've been in my industry for 30 years, or I've been in my industry for 15 years, and I forgot about X, Y, Z. The tribal knowledge that I've been passing down, I don't even know why I do that, but I got to pass that down because this doesn't work. It's that stuff. You need to take on that new focal plane and say to myself, if I were hired today, what would I tell someone? Things that I've now just learned to work around. Those are the things that we should be attacking. Those are the things we should be going after. So it's important. Develop a learning organization. It's very key. When it comes to manufacturing maturity, core values, if you're going to do a manufacturing maturity assessment, one of the key assessments should be around this body of knowledge. People, organization, material, and process are essential into creating manufacturing maturity. For those that are here, and I should say distribution maturity as well. This here, I can't emphasize this enough. This is what a manufacturing maturity assessment or a manufacturing maturity model should be focused on. There's other models that also should be focused on education. Maybe I'm not here, so how do I evolve my people, educate my people? Education to application. How does that evolve onto the shop floor, into my distribution process? But here is the key. So team involvement, training under people, leadership, alignment, workplace organization, under organization, under material, flow manufacturing, material movement, order leveling, key. Under processes, quality and visual controls. Those are so essential. And again, when it comes to team involvement, here's an excerpt of one of ours, making sure that we're going through that, understanding where people are at. This is critical. Please, if you remember anything today, remember that people, organization, material and process and manufacturing are the areas that you want to focus on. And that's both supported from digital intensity as well as functional intensity. I think I want to show you a business case that actually I worked on. This was quite an obstacle, right? So seeing beyond the problem. This was an actual representation of a project I worked on. This project was based around a certain product that was being developed for the mining industry. The mining industry, being an old industry, had to support globally their workforce and the products that they sent out. In this case, it was products around mining drills. So these big drills that deal with materials, not oil and gas, but minerals, you know, silver, gold, whatever it might be, copper, all that stuff. They have these big drills that they engaged. Now with that, they said, we have a real problem. It's taking us 138 days from order to delivery to our customers. And what you can imagine, anything that takes that long opens up the market for potential new entrants to come in and say, look, I can get you a pseudo product, same type of product, for 80 days, 90 days. Where's the market going to shift? If this is high demand and they need it today, 138 days is not workable. And I'm not here to explain the whole diagram, but here's a value stream map that we did. And you can see up here, there was a lot of technology, a lot of information being passed from one system to another system to another system. And then so the information flow going from left to right was pretty convoluted. Then material flow going from right to left was horrendous. Material was all over the place. Where is my material? How do I produce this? How do I manufacture this? And so you can see high level, but the point being here is I want to show you at a 100,000 foot level, man, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of confusion. And we know that the evolution of quality, they say error is an evolution of how many times someone touches something, right? So error is more prone in your system the more times you hand something off. We went in, we did a bunch of maturity models on their manufacturing. We did maturity models on their IT assessments. We did maturity models in the distribution centers. We looked at the people. We looked at the process, the material movement. We really focused in on this and started seeing all areas of improvement that we can work on. So we did a manufacturing excellence education. We started seeing, hey, look, at these particular factory, guess what? The shop floor, the people that are working on the floor really don't have a great understanding of what's best in class, what are things that they need to focus on. We got that firsthand, so we understood where we needed to start working from an education standpoint. From an excellence standpoint, are they applying any of this stuff that they gained or any of the knowledge that they have? We started seeing, yeah, they had good focus on customers, but they really started getting weak in delivery performance. And so how long is your customer going to deal with that, right? We started looking at workforce motivation. People started getting demotivated. Value streams, they didn't understand how they affected the overall. They didn't understand the decisions that they were making, how it was affecting upstream and downstream. They didn't understand that by doing so-called improvements, not knowing the bigger picture, that their improvements were actually creating additional lag in the system, additional problems. We did the maturity. This one here is the key one around the four core elements that I showed you. But you can see here that team involvement, training, leadership, they scored high in some areas, but there was weaknesses in workplace organization. There was weaknesses around visual controls. People just didn't have a lot of that visual cue knowledge to say, am I doing good? Am I not doing good? When I leave work today, did I add value? Did I not add value? They're not seeing that. So we started identifying a lot of these areas of where we can improve. Then we said, how does this align to the overall goals? Now, this is just a simple excerpt, but one of their goals was increase revenue, right? So how do what's happening here affect their overall goals, and how does it align? So we went to the executives. We started talking to them about their objectives, understood what those objectives were, understand the underlying strategies under those objectives, and then we started understanding what were the processes and the enablers of those, and what did we have to tackle when it came to waste, when it came to maturity. And then we understand, okay, everything needs a measurement. If we're going to go through this endeavor, what are the measurements that we need to be able to hit here as we make this process work? So this is how the map evolved. And I'm going to show you a comparison between this version and the last version. You can see, even not understanding the industry, there's a lot more space here. There's a lot more clarity, that it probably takes a little less time for me to understand this if someone would walk me through this. So here's the results. And this is an actual case. We've actually done this, and this is actual results. Now, with that, I'm going to say this. So increased throughput by 60%. Honestly, that was unheard of. Reduced turnaround time from 138 days to 15 days, I kid you not. We reduced it from 138 days anywhere in the world to 15 days. We went in, understood how to do those maturity models. We understood what we needed to work on, and we got the buy-in from the top, made sure everything was aligned at the objective levels, made sure that we had the appropriate measurements, and we started working. Now this took, a course of a year, started working, but we got it down to 15 days anywhere in the world. And what's interesting about this, because people will say, wait a minute, 15 days, are these big products, are they small products? Some you just can't do that. You got to put on the ocean. Well, this was ocean ship at first, but because we were able to reduce the cost, we actually justified shipping everything air from that point on, because we were still making revenue hand over fist, even with air freight. We were doing that because we reduced so much of the other waste in the system that was the viable option, and that was the option they went with. And so what did these people do in part of this process? We took their products and their lines and took it from here, and we expedited up into this region here. Now, again, you remember that from the beginning of the call, this was down in this area. This is standard. But for this particular organization, we were able to take them from the status quo, 138 days, bad processes, functional intensity, bad digital intensity, put it all together and put them in a completely different bracket. And part of that, look, I know we're towards the end of our hour here. Part of that transformation really resides around having a strong understanding and objective focus on where you're going and how systems can support you, how processes can support you. The Microsoft ecosystem, for all that are on the call, have probably dealt with one portion or other, and I'm not going to explain this too thoroughly here, but everyone is dealing with a certain amount of Microsoft products. You probably right now measure a lot of your measurements come off of Excel, but as you endeavor to walk through the model, you start seeing, where's my vision? What's the potential of my vision? That Microsoft has really come forward and says, we see where the functional intention is now. We see where your objectives are. We're going to do what we can to make sure that we emphasize the strength of that platform that you're approaching. That we emphasize through Azure, through data analytics, the measurements that you're looking for, through having, incorporated systems that work alongside each other. So we're not piece parting digital information. We have one source of truth going forward. That for those areas that you have that uniqueness, that secret sauce we talked about earlier on, that there are, other applications that can take that and work seamlessly with the products, or even going above and beyond and doing low code, no code type of things in your organization around power apps, power objects, things of that nature that you can really gravitate towards. So as you endeavor to go down this journey, having this support is phenomenal. This was unheard of 20 years ago, to have this type of knowledge at your hands to expedite your overall value. For Arvella, you've seen a lot of what we do. You've seen that we have a structure and methodology around it. You see core results of what we've done. For us, when we go into a client, we do manufacturing maturity assessments, and we focus on areas of focus around education, around excellence, what's the application, around maturity of the organization, both from leadership all the way down, alignment from leadership all the way down, and from down all the way up. Data readiness. Are people ready for something like this? Because that one is so critical, and a lot of people forget to mention that prior to going into assessment. Strategic initiatives. Where do you plan to go? How does all this align? Where can we make the biggest bang for our buck? And then facility walkthroughs. It's always great to have an outside person come in and look at your facility to add perspective, not on how you do work. We can never do that. I personally will never walk into a facility and say, I know how to do your job better than you. I couldn't do that. That would discredit me right from the beginning. What I can do, though, is look at processes and ask questions that maybe have become immune over time. I can ask why they're doing things so that we can identify some of those low-hanging fruit again, to start maturing their process from a level 1 of here's my baseline, I don't know where we are, we don't have the support, to get you up to that level 5 of the organizations around you, the organizations supporting you, wants you to develop, wants you to progress. Those are things that we can do. And then overall, really the climax here, or the summary. Maturity models are awesome. They're out there. We have them. We've endeavored to do them. If it's something new to you, we'd love to work with you on these maturity models, because the evolution of being able to show your own executives how you're maturing is great. Sometimes when you see here's a starting point, here's the ending point, and they don't see traction here, they don't necessarily understand what that middle ground is. They don't understand what you have accomplished in the process. And sometimes it falls on deaf ears. But having a maturity model so you can see the evolution, you can show them the wins of how you've exceeded from level 1 to a level 2 to a level 2 to a level 3 is critical. That to me is critical. Well, there you have it. That was my webinar on maturity models, learning models, transformation. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm very open for questions. I'm also open to be contacted, at other points if you want. So please.
Thank you, John. And at this time, I once again want to invite attendees to ask any questions. You can submit them in the questions window in your GoToWebinar control panel now. And with a minute left, I do see one question in here for you, John.
Sure.
How do you help guide an organization that tends to want to jump from step 1 right to step 5 of a maturity model without really understanding?
Well, that's the important thing. I often use the scenario of my son's going to college. And my son, when he looked at college at first, 5 years, 4 years looks too far ahead. It just seems like every semester is brutal, and I'm not seeing this. So what I tell my son is look back at the last 2 years of your life. How fast did it go? So the key here is to help educate and understand that organization of what the levels are so they can see where they are. Help assess them so they can see where their baseline is and what they can evolve to. And then from there, truthfully, helping them celebrate the small wins. And that's why I use my son's education as an example. Celebrating those small wins helps them see that it's not so far out of hand that I can't reach it, but there's things that are happening and there's a progression path and it's something measurable quantitatively.
And that is all the time we have for today. Thank you, John, so much for presenting to us, and everyone else for joining this presentation.